I'm Bill Good, and I welcome James Moore, Conservative incumbent, Port Moody, Westwood, Port Coquitlam, and Minister of Canadian Heritage and Official Languages, to the program. We are well into the federal election now. Two questions right off the top, or two issues. Just before the news, and I'm assuming that you're traveling and probably couldn't hear the callers just before the news, Karen called to say that she heard you speak. She liked your vision of the country and the position the country is in vis-a-vis the United States and many other European countries on a financial basis. And so I'll start by asking you, if re-elected, will the budget that you were not able to pass before the dissolution of Parliament, will it be returned in its present form?
Yes, it will. I mean, our budget is part of the foundation of our platform, and people, by the way, who want to see our platform can go to conservative.ca. It's not small. It's not sort of it's a comprehensive platform. It's 65 pages long, and on the last page of the platform, we go through how we pay for all of these things. Yes, we will table that budget because there are items in there that are very good for Canada, that are costed out, that make sense. It's one thing to go into an election campaign and to make grandiose promises, but we're paying for things and promising things that we can pay for when we balance the budget. They're modest. I mean, for example, you'll remember a couple elections ago, we promised to cut the GST from 7% to 5%. The Liberals in '93 promised to get rid of it. Well, no, we're making promises we can afford. We can afford to cut the GST to 5%, and that's what we did. And our platform is costed, and these are things that we can afford to do and to keep the economy going in the right direction overall.
The other caller, who identified himself as Rick, seemed appalled at the fact that we would be in the business of dropping bombs in Libya, or be in Libya in any way, shape, or form with a military presence. Why is Canada there?
Well, we are there, of course, as part of a UN mandate. And look, Muammar Gaddafi is somebody who needs to be confronted when he's murdering his citizens. We're there again on a UN mandate, not on our own. We're there with other countries, and we're standing up for human rights. It's one thing for Canada to say, for us to often say, as we like to do, that Canada stands up for human rights. We stand up for peace and security around the world. But that sometimes means you have to show up. And so we're showing up there. We're helping to impose a no-fly zone over the north to make sure that Colonel Gaddafi is not murdering his citizens. This is, I think, more than a responsible approach by the United Nations and Canada to be involved in such a mission.
I think the point Rick was wanting to make was that we are doing this at a high cost, and the United States at a far greater cost, at a time when that government is in desperate financial shape. Many of their states are facing bankruptcy. We have a large deficit in this country. Is it the right thing to be doing, to be engaging our military in an operation that has little or no impact on Canada?
Flatly, yes, and I do think it does have an impact on Canada. It has an impact on Canada's reputation internationally when you see somebody who is engaging in clear violations of human rights against his own citizens in defiance of UN mandates, and for us not to stand up. We believe in the United Nations. We believe in peace and security around the world, and where we can contribute, we will contribute. And I think to stand back and to not get involved, I think would be really appalling. That's been tried, by the way, in places like Rwanda, where the world stood back and didn't do anything. In Bosnia, it happened in the early 1990s, where people stand back and didn't do anything, and thousands of people were killed. We need to stand up sometimes, and sometimes, yeah, it costs money, but I think it costs more in the long term for us not to stand by people who are being oppressed.
Stephen Harper is promising a majority Conservative government would bundle all the law and order legislation it's been trying to pass into one omnibus bill and pass it within 100 days of taking power.
Yeah, and it's needed. We've tried over two minority parliaments in a row we've tried different strategies, parliamentary strategies, to get things done. We tried bundling, for example, when Stéphane Dion was still the Liberal leader in our first mandate in Parliament from 06 to 08. We tried putting forward one-off bills. Some of them passed, some of them didn't. We tried bundling them together in one of our pieces of legislation called the Tackling Violent Crime Act. We had some success with that, but more often than not, we faced a brick wall. Only Conservatives believe in getting tough on crime in the way that we think is the smart way to get tough on crime, which is to have mandatory minimum penalties for violent and sexual offenders, and to have enough police on the streets to enforce our laws, to have enough prosecutors so that the courts are not backlogged, and to make sure that our streets are safe, so that those who are playing by the rules are separated from those who are not. And the Liberals and the NDP just fundamentally don't believe in the way that we do when it comes to tackling crime. So that you're correct. if the Conservatives, if our government is reelected, and if we are in a majority situation, we will bundle all of our crime legislation together into one bill, and we will pass it in the first 100 days.
The past two elections, Mr. Harper has been reluctant to use the term majority, and yet every day in this campaign, he is basically asking the voters of Canada to give your party a majority. What's changed?
Not much has changed. I mean, we always want to say it, but obviously now there's a focus on it because we hope and we think that good governance has meant good politics, and good politics has meant that our party is now in a position where we actually may win a majority. So we're explicitly asking the public for a majority government, and not least of which is, as well as because, as the Prime Minister outlined in the first few days of this campaign, is that in the last election campaign, the Parliament of Canada sat for less than 1 week, and the Liberals, the Bloc, and the NDP got together and tried to form a coalition government. So it is important to make a choice between us and that option, because those are the two options that will be presented. The Liberals can say that, they won't form a coalition. The fact is, they said they wouldn't form a coalition before the last election campaign. They turned around, and within the first week of Parliament sitting, they formed a coalition government and tried to overturn the results of the election. We, of course, prorogued Parliament. We took a break for a month. We came back with our economic action plan, and our economic action plan has worked, and now Canada is leading the G7 in economic growth.
Is there anything in your crime bill that would prevent the appalling situation that British Columbians are expressing outrage at this week, the decision to allow a triple child killer, Alan Schoenborn, to have escorted visits into the community just, 3 years to the day that the murders were discovered, and 1 year after he was sent into a hospital?
We would have mandatory minimum jail times for people who have been convicted of violent crimes. So yes, our bills would make a difference, and he would be in jail, and he wouldn't be in Coquitlam Center shopping in the shopping mall on an escorted visit, eating a hot dog around other kids. This decision, this is my community, by the way. This
I know.
Is Port Coquitlam, and my constituents are outraged, and they're rightfully outraged. I don't care if he's sedated. I don't care if he's surrounded by 5 corrections officers. I don't care if people say that he's no longer a threat. It's just wrong. The guy murdered brutally 3 kids. And the fact that this guy should even be out of any kind of an institution and in public and eating a sandwich anywhere, out in public, breathing the same fresh air that everybody else does, is an outrage. I don't care what some criminologists may or may not say about how they can sedate him and keep him comfortable. It's wrong. It's just wrong. And this guy should be in an institution, and he shouldn't be in Port Coquitlam.
Your call's welcome to James Moore, Conservative incumbent, Port Moody, Westwood, Port Coquitlam, Minister of Canadian Heritage and Official Languages. We'll be back with your calls, 604-280-9898, toll free around the province of British Columbia, 1-877-399-9898. Talking with the Conservative candidate and incumbent in Port Moody, Westwood, Port Coquitlam, James Moore, Minister of Canadian Heritage and Official Languages. And I welcome your calls to him. Ron, good morning.
Yes, good morning. I'm a conservative-leaning voter this time around, primarily because of your stance on law and order. So I'd like to know, what specifically are you going to do to try to address this revolving door situation we have of criminals in, criminals out all the time, being released, sometimes even time served, and what's happening when, a lot of them are drug addicts, and the judges are releasing them because, it's a societal problem, they say. So what steps can you take to address this?
Well, excuse me, if you look at our platform, I think there are a number of steps. As you no doubt note that, we can have as many police officers on the street as possible. I've done ride-alongs with the Port Moody Police, Coquitlam RCMP, Vancouver Police, and there's a consistent message that comes from them is, yes, we need police in the streets. Yes, we want to make sure they have the equipment. Yes, we want to make sure we have adequate forces. But it's very clear to me, and Bill, you know this from call after call that you hear on the open lines, is that people are frustrated that judges are not applying the law. If you read the alternative platforms of the Liberals and the NDP, they always talk about raising the maximums. We will increase the maximum penalty for X crime to X number of years. That doesn't matter. What you need to have is you have to have mandatory minimum jail times for certainly the worst crimes that we have in our society. And obviously for those young kids who are the most vulnerable, who may be slipping into crime or hanging out with the wrong kids, who maybe come from circumstances that are really difficult for them to be upwardly mobile in life, we need to have support for them. We need to have alternative programs and strong schools and good role models in place for them to help them to be mentors and mentorship programs. So, the answer to solving crime is complicated. It is difficult. But certainly we have to hold our judges accountable and make sure that they are implementing tough sentences that will make our streets safer and hold people accountable for the crimes that they commit.
I'm frustrated every time I see or hear a news report that tells me what the maximum penalty is for a crime that's been committed, because I know how rarely maximum sentences are ever handed out.
And if people, I can tell you, if this BC review panel that made this decision on Shoreham about, if those people on that panel actually lived in Port Coquitlam and lived in the community into which they were going to release this triple kid murderer, if they actually lived in that community, they wouldn't for one hot second think that that was a smart thing to do. They're not reflecting the views of the community. Now, if people who are in public service, it's not just politicians, it's not just premiers and city councilors and school boards, but it's all of the public service has to listen to the public and be reflective of the interests of the public, and that includes judges. And these judges who are making these decisions like they made about allowing this triple murder to have day access to malls and to go out for lunch in a community less than 3 years after he killed 3 kids is outrageous. And the judges have to listen to the public, and if they won't, we're going to mandate that they have to, and we're going to have mandatory minimum jail time for people who murder kids.
But it seems once someone is committed by being insane, they aren't treated as a prisoner anymore. They're treated as a patient. And people are bending over backwards to do the best thing for the patient. And I just think that flies in the face of what people expect for someone who, under any circumstances, has murdered 3 children.
Well, it's exactly well said. And even if institutionally they want to see them as a patient, fine, see them as a patient, but keep them within a building that has 4 walls, and let's not send them down to the mall to have a hot dog next to a bunch of kids.
Well, the question that came to my mind is, don't they have coffee in the hospital? And when the member of the BC Review Commission talked about him perhaps going to a park, he's in a hospital that's in a park-like setting.
Yeah, and see the thing that, like I said the line a minute ago, the point of the criminal justice system is to separate those who can play by the rules from those who cannot. And if you cannot play by the rules because you are a career criminal, you're a sociopath, you're violent, you've made whatever choices in life, or because you're susceptible to whatever behavior, whatever it is, I don't care. But I want to live in a community that is safe, that is not only free from crime, but free from fear of the threat of crime. And this guy walking around openly in public, even if he's escorted and if he's sedated, I don't care. It doesn't make me feel safe, doesn't make the community feel safe, and more than that, it's just wrong. It's just wrong. There's a simple standard of right and wrong that is being violated by allowing this guy to have access to the community less than 3 years after he killed 3 kids. It's just wrong.
Wayne, good morning.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I want to follow up from that previous caller, the one, I think, before the news, Rick, about our involvement in Libya.
Yes.
And I think it simply confirms the overall perception of the Conservative Party, whether we're right or wrong to be in Libya, but I think his comment reflects the overall perception of the Conservative Party that they're prepared to go into military action at the drop of a hat. Now, Mr. Moore...
Just a minute. Was it not the Liberals under Mr. Chrétien that put our troops in Afghanistan?
Yeah, but I want to go back a little bit earlier than that. Mr. Moore, when you were in your mid to late 20s, having never served in the military yourself, I think it was you who passed a motion in the House of Commons to send our troops to Iraq. And the Conservatives were all in favour of going to Iraq, and look at what a disaster that was. I think any time there's military action, the purchase of these jets, it's all reflective of an overall perception that you've got that military tone that I don't think is Canadian.
Well, I will just frankly disagree with you. I think you're wrong. Bill just said it exactly right. You know, the Liberals put Canada into Afghanistan without a vote in the House of Commons. We had a vote in the House of Commons, and we consulted back into Parliament and made sure that there was a confidence of the House of Commons to go forward and to extend the mission back up until 2013 with the policing role that we have right now. When we are in Libya, we have planes there imposing a no-fly zone. This is not the Canadian government doing this. This is the United Nations Security Council doing this, and we did it after deliberations, after consideration, after a great deal of pressure, and after a great deal of consultation with our international allies. So, you know, of course we don't rush around the world. We obviously have very limited military capacity overall, but where we can contribute and where we can be involved in defense of Canadian values, which is to stand up against those who are abusing human rights and stand up in defense of democracy, I think that's an entirely responsible use of Canadian foreign influence.
Joan.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
I would like to ask the Conservative member if he feels that the criminal situation is so wrong, why hasn't he done something about it? He's been in for 5 years. The whole country would be behind him.
Yeah, there's some things we have done, some things we can't do. I mean, some things, for example, when Chuck Cadman was the Member of Parliament just before he passed away, one of his big private member's bills that he put forward was to make street racing a crime. We all remember in Vancouver, Constable Jimmy Ng, when he was killed by a street racer down in Richmond. We made that. That is now the law of Canada. We've done other things. For example, in 2009, the RCMP had their best recruitment year, so we've hired more police officers. We hired 2,500 more community police officers. So for those communities like Port Moody that are outside the umbrella of the RCMP, we've hired more police officers. We do have some truth in sentencing for some violent crimes, but we can't get everything done that we want to get done. We have been in power as a government for 5 years. We do have some achievements that we're very proud of, but the simple fact is we don't have the votes. That's what this election is about. Do you want to have a minority parliament that can do some things right and try to move the balls forward in some ways? Or do you want to have a steady, stable, majority conservative government that can really push our tough on crime agenda in the ways that I've described in this show and the ways that are described in our platform, and to get that done? We can only do what we can do with the votes that we have. And when you have liberals like Ujjal Dosanjh and NDP MPs like Libby Davies in the House of Commons going in the wrong direction, there's only so much we can get done.
Jerry, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Moore. I just want to know how well are those Liberal-purchased submarines are sailing? And why don't you mention more about the NDP in Nova Scotia, their 2% raise on their HST? And just let you know, as in the great cost-cutting of the Liberals, that the RCMP for about 4 or 5 years didn't even get a raise.
Yeah. Well, there's first your first point on submarines. They are there. Of course, Liberals bought used submarines from Great Britain. They were dented, need huge retrofit. We're in the process of retrofitting them. We're sending them into the north. They're part of our perimeter security dynamic across Canada. They're being used, but you're right. We think the Liberals bought the wrong kit, but we have them, and we're going to make the best use of them as we can. The HST is a central point. I find it laughable when Jack Layton and the NDP try to make the HST an issue in British Columbia, when in Nova Scotia, the NDP government in Nova Scotia increased the HST by 2 points, and in the week that the Parliament of Canada dissolved in order to trigger this election campaign, the NDP finance critic, Thomas Mulcair, the deputy leader of the NDP, was on his feet in the House of Commons demanding that the HST be implemented in the province of Quebec. And the NDP actually now tries to pretend as though they're against the HST. They raised it in Nova Scotia, they want it in Quebec, and they come to British Columbia and they think it's bad for British Columbia. The NDP has no principles whatsoever when it comes to taxation.
Mr. Moore, thank you for doing this.
Always a pleasure.
News headlines to the bottom of the hour, just ahead.